She didn't arrive at school, the call said. My perfect morning shattered. Security footage showed her hand in hand with a stranger. The truth destroyed my marriage that afternoon. I always kick off my day around 6:30 in the morning. This morning I actually woke up before my alarm on my phone even went off. Andrew, lying right beside me, was sound asleep, taking deep, calm breaths. I gathered my long, brown hair and secured it in a ponytail, gave him a soft kiss on his cheek, and officially began my day. Now in the kitchen, the sun's rays pour in through the window above the sink. We've been living here in this house in the Shadow Lane district of Newton for 5 years now. This white colonial-style house is just right for our family. I really enjoy taking care of the front lawn, especially when the grass is covered in dew, usually on the weekends. Over the weekends, we love having barbecues on the patio and spending time with the families who live close by. I decided to work as a marketing consultant from my home because I wanted to focus on spending more time with my family. Because I'm so organized and detail-oriented, I managed to balance my job with family life very well. The night before, I'd already got everything ready for my online meeting that starts at 9 a.m. As I popped a bagel in the toaster, I thought about the 2014 Boston Business Conference. That's where I first met Andrew during a coffee break. I was instantly drawn to him. He was really tall, almost 6 feet, and we had some fantastic conversations. As an investment advisory firm manager, he manages transactions between Boston and New York, so he has to go away on business trips quite often. But he's always there for his family during the holidays. He constantly gives me and Lily presents, which shows how considerate he is. This morning started off with the same calmness as most mornings. The gentle light filtering in through the window is warming up my kitchen countertop now. I can practically smell the promise of new growth in the air. I got up at 6:30 a.m. like I always do and began to make breakfast. Andrew and Lily were getting bagels and scrambled eggs. I was having Greek yogurt. The cold orange juice glistened in the glasses on the table, looking like morning dew. It was a picture-perfect morning. But a tiny bit of worry was still there, tucked away in my thoughts. I was wondering if it had something to do with the dream I'd had. "Good morning, Mom." Hearing Lily's feet rushing down the stairs chased that feeling away. She's definitely excited today. Her school uniform, fresh from Mason Rice Elementary School, shines brightly in the sunlight. "Good morning, everyone." Andrew came to the table with the newspaper. His smile wiped away the small worry I had. Another morning filled with love starts to unfold. I have a math test scheduled for today. I also studied yesterday, so I am certain I'll ace it. Lily happily prattled on, picking at her eggs with her fork. Her face looks sweet and innocent. I can't help but smile. "That's correct. You really went over the material yesterday. Mom, this orange juice is really good." Our usual chat filled the kitchen. Andrew looked at the stock prices while also nodding along to Lily's stories. How very special these everyday mornings are. Around 8:15, Lily starts messing with the collar of her uniform. My daughter's backpack has all her books and supplies, just like we confirmed last evening. We also finished going over everything for the math exam. "Lily, please remember your scarf. The mornings are still cold." At the doorway, I give my daughter a final once-over. I smooth her brown hair, check that her uniform buttons are fastened, and look at her shoelaces. These tiny acts of care bring me such joy as a mom. "I'm okay, Mom. It's time to leave." It's always 8:30 in the morning when we head out. "Be careful. Good luck on your test." After one last hug, Lily headed out the door. While watching her walk away, I wave several times. She turns back, smiling and waving back at me. That action is something I'll always remember. Just as I was getting ready to begin the online meeting scheduled for 9:00 a.m., the phone suddenly started ringing. The caller ID showed the number for her school. The time on the clock said 9:15 a.m. It was Mrs. Mitchell. "Your daughter hasn't shown up at school this morning." Hearing those words, it felt like everything stopped. I felt my face go white. There was a buzzing sound in my ears. "What?" I asked. "But I absolutely watched her leave at 8:30. My voice was shaking. My throat felt like it was vibrating. I couldn't speak easily. Something might have gone wrong during her walk to school. "Could you come right now?" I said, "Yes, I'll be there immediately." My hands were shaking as I canceled the 9:00 a.m. meeting. I had trouble typing the email and made many errors because my hands were shaking. I tried calling Andrew but got no response. He was likely in an important meeting. I left a message on his voicemail. I tried calling Andrew, but he didn't pick up. No response at all. Despite my best efforts to stay composed, my fear was obvious. "Andrew, I need you to call me back right now. Lily's not at school yet." I started running through different scenarios in my head while I stood there waiting for the taxi. A car crash? Could someone have taken her? Maybe she was just lost. The more I considered everything, the more my fears spiraled. Those couple of minutes before the taxi showed up, grabbing my wallet and jacket from the door seemed like forever. Outside, the calm, sunny spring morning went on as if nothing was happening. My neighbor was working in her garden. A mail carrier rode by on his bike. It was all just a regular morning, but inside me, everything felt wrong. I hopped in the taxi and frantically tried to recall everything that happened this morning while staring out the window at the road to school. Lily's grin, her school uniform, her backpack, the laces on her shoes, everything had seemed perfectly normal. Or had I overlooked something important? The world outside the taxi window felt like an alternate reality. Sitting in the taxi, watching the route to school, I intertwined my fingers together, almost like I was praying. I'd never experienced this 15-minute ride feeling so protracted. Please, let her be safe. My plea was silent. The taxi hit a red light, and that stoplight just cranked up my worry. As a parent, why hadn't I taken more precautions? Why didn't I walk her to school this morning? As panic washed over me, the taxi was still headed in the direction of the school. When we got to school, Vice Principal Mrs. Thompson was already standing at the front door. Spotting how upset I was, she gently touched my shoulder. "Mrs. Mitchell, let's try to remain calm, all right? We'll look at the security camera recordings." That hallway leading to the Vice Principal's office seemed to stretch on forever. The kids' drawings and crafts, which normally cheered me up, looked unsettling. Mrs. Walker, Lily's teacher, would be there soon as well. Her being there gave me a little bit of reassurance. The Vice Principal's office felt more closed in than I ever remembered. The clock on the wall read 10 a.m. We could hear the kids yelling and playing during PE outside, but the room was almost completely silent. Mrs. Thompson started the computer, and the images popped up on the big screen. An area on the path Lily took to school. The time displayed as 8:45 a.m. A scene I recognized unfolded on the screen, shown in black and white. "Here it is," Mrs. Walker said. I held my breath. Lily's small body showed up in the footage, carrying her LL Bean backpack and moving as she always did. After that, a high school girl stepped into view from the side of the screen. A navy blazer and a plaid skirt. A high school girl dressed in a crisp uniform walked towards Lily. My pulse quickened. "That's Newton North High School's uniform," Mrs. Thompson said. It felt like I was hearing Thompson from a great distance. Looking at the video, that girl from the high school was speaking with Lily. My daughter halted and started chatting with her. We couldn't understand what they were saying since there was no sound. However, Lily's face showed a smile. "Lily," my raspy voice resonated in the silence. And suddenly what happened next was almost impossible to believe. The high school girl offered her hand to Lily, and my daughter grasped it immediately. They walked away holding hands out of the shot just like sisters. "Mrs. Mitchell." It was Mrs. Walker's voice that pulled me back to the present, but I couldn't say a word. My brain had just shut down as if I couldn't think anymore. "We need to call the police." Mrs. Thompson's composure was almost the only thing keeping me from losing it completely. "Yes, we must." The response was weak, and it didn't even sound like me. Mrs. Walker was right next to me and softly held my hand. "I'm not leaving you." The joyous sounds of children playing still drifted in from outside. Above us, the sky was clear and blue, with sunlight that felt like spring washing over us. But everything felt dark to me. Why would Lily go off with a high school stranger? Why wasn't she careful? The questions just kept coming. What was more horrifying was that my daughter didn't put up any sort of struggle. While Mrs. Thompson called the police, I went back and watched the video over and over again. I wanted to get every detail of Lily's face and the high school girl's features memorized. She was wearing a navy blazer, had long black hair and a slim figure. This whole Newton North High School uniform thing was swirling around in my head, messing me up. They said the cops would be here super fast. When I heard them say that, I just kept looking at Lily's last smile on the screen. Why didn't I hold her closer back then? The guilt was just crushing me. The cops got to the vice principal's office at 10:30 in the morning, Detective Johnson and Officer Parker. They got right to work, figuring out what was going on. Officer Parker was writing everything down really carefully while I tried to explain everything, and my voice was shaking. "You mentioned a Newton North High School uniform. We're going to confirm that," they said. Detective Johnson got in touch with the high school right away, being really efficient. Meanwhile, I was showing the officers pictures of Lily, all the happy ones I had saved on my phone. It had only been a regular morning scene just a couple of hours before. Because of the uniform, there's no question it's definitely that uniform. Now we'll compare it to the student pictures. The police split up, going to check the photos that Newton North High School sent over. Pictures of girls were popping up one after the other on the monitor. I was squinting, trying to see them all, that black hair, her thin body, and the soft way she looked. "Let's check the nearby security cameras. Let's look at the other cameras, too." Officer Parker opened up a map and pointed out where all the cameras were along the school route. Cameras at the corners of convenience stores, the ATMs at the bank, and the cameras at the intersections. The eyes of our modern world were now where we had to put all our hope. Here it is. Each time a new video surfaced, my pulse would quicken. The two individuals we were seeking were caught on camera near the banks. Their faces also appeared in the security footage from the convenience store. Then a crucial clip surfaced. They seemed to be going in the direction of the Newton Free Library. The pair in the video really did look like sisters. It seemed like Lily was chatting, sometimes gazing up at the older girl. Her face didn't betray any fear at all. It was time to check out the library. Once I got into the police car, some of my worry had subsided. At least Lily was grinning. There was no indication that she was in danger. Even so, the maternal concern wouldn't completely go away. When we pulled up to the library, another team was already searching the building. We quietly walked through the building, trying not to make any noise. As we walked up the stairs to the second-floor children's section, my heart started racing again. And then it just unfolded right in front of us. Bathed in soft sunlight pouring through the bookshelves, Lily was sitting beside the older girl. They had a picture book open, and Lily was listening closely to her read. Her face looked completely serene. When I spoke, Lily and the girl both turned around. "Mom," Lily looked confused. The older girl next to her slowly rose to her feet. There was no anger or ill will in her face, which we'd been anticipating. Instead, there was something that looked like sorrow. "I'm sorry." The high school girl's words echoed strangely in the library's quiet. Suddenly, from the kids' area, a woman came toward us. She was a librarian, and she had a badge on. Her face seemed determined. Let me elaborate. Her voice was soft but unwavering. Right then, I just knew in my gut, this wasn't just some silly thing a little girl had done. There was something more profound and complicated at play here. The police officers looked at each other like they were getting what was happening. Detective Johnson started calling headquarters on the radio. Inside the library, the only noise was the loud ticking of the clock's second hand. An hour after the truth was finally told in the library's conference room, we turned at the sound of the door opening. There was Andrew. The relaxed look he usually had was gone, and his face was white as he looked around the conference room. Rebecca. His eyes found me first, then moved to Hannah, then to Susan. The life he thought he'd left behind 15 years ago had actually caught up to him. Dad. Hannah's voice shook as she spoke, breaking the tension in the room. I stood up and just stared at my husband, well, the man who I couldn't consider my husband anymore. Discovering our so-called happy marriage had all been a lie made me furious and heartbroken. Why, when I asked, Andrew struggled to speak. The man who had used the fake name Michael Baker at Stanford, then ran off to avoid his problems. This same man had pretended to be the perfect husband in my life. "I'm sorry, I really am." Andrew's apology sounded insincere. Lily re-entered the room just then. Not comprehending what was going on, my little girl cheerfully went over to her sister Hannah. "Daddy, look, this is my big sister. She reads storybooks with me." Lily's complete happiness made the grown-ups' faces become a confusing mix of emotions. Lily, Susan had put everything into raising her for a decade and a half. She worked hard as a librarian without holding on to any bitterness, always looking ahead. That unwavering character and grace seemed to be destroying Andrew in this moment. Hannah's face held a complex expression. She was torn between her father and her sister. The dad she had longed for so long and the sister she had finally found. It broke my heart a little to see the hope and nervousness flickering in the 15-year-old's eyes. "What do we do now?" I turned away, chilled at Andrew's shaky question. An attempt to get out of a situation with one lie had now ruined so many people's lives. The atmosphere in the room felt heavy with an unfixable error. But seeing Lily's innocent smile and Hannah's hopeful look, it didn't feel like the end, but rather a new start. The setting sun cast a glow outside. Everyone in the room felt this day would change all of our lives. It had been a week since that shocking day at the library. We met in a cafe in Newton on a calm Sunday. It was the first step toward talking through everything calmly. Grown-ups sat across from each other at a big table by the window. Lily was in the corner with Hannah, looking at books. I had a lot of complicated emotions watching the strong bond between the sisters. I'll share my experience first. Andrew reluctantly started to speak. He shared the story of meeting Susan 15 years ago in the Stanford University Library. He was out on the West Coast back then, focused on studying investments. He used the alias Michael Baker and falsely claimed he'd inherited his family's pharmaceutical business. I was scared of having obligations. When he admitted this, Susan simply looked down. She found out she was pregnant, but Andrew had already vanished, and the contact information he left was fake. She spent 15 years working tirelessly as a librarian, raising Hannah on her own. Then maybe it was destiny, Susan went on. I got hired as a librarian at the Newton Library and moved to this town. Years went by, and I ended up marrying Andrew and giving birth to Lily. Our life seemed ideal, but when Andrew found out Susan and Hannah were at the library, he ran away. He pretended not to know them, still avoiding dealing with what had happened. Without the DNA test, it wouldn't have worked out. I interrupted Andrew, my expression hard. The DNA records where Hannah's grandparents had put in their information for genealogical research. It all started with that matching up of relatives. Then our family pictures surfaced online. The truth surfaced in unpredictable circumstances. I wanted to meet Lily, Hannah said softly. After I found out I had a sister, I went to the library every single day. Across from us, Lily was showing Hannah a new book. Even with all the complexities of adulthood, the time shared between the sisters felt immune. I've got something I want to contribute as well. My words were delivered with conviction. Ending the marriage was something we couldn't avoid. But I really wanted to preserve the connection the girls had. Lily absolutely loved having a sibling, and Hannah cherished every moment they had together. No one had the authority to destroy that beautiful, innocent connection. I figured we needed to make sure there was time for her sister. Let's ensure the sisters can spend weekends together, I thought. Susan just gave a quiet nod in response to what I proposed. Although we, the grown-ups, were hurting, we were going to find a new normal for the girls' happiness. Maybe that was the only way we could make amends. Mom, look, Lily shouted excitedly. Big sister showed me an astronomy book. Just seeing that smile between the sisters seemed to make the coffee shop feel a little bit lighter. The future won't be without difficulties. There would be legal battles of the divorce, figuring out child support and visitation schedules to manage. It was going to be a lot of problems to tackle. Nevertheless, if we wanted to keep their happy smiles, the adults had to start building new relationships. Every Saturday at the library, Susan's idea became a real, tangible start. It would be a safe place where the sisters could spend quality time together. The library she had lovingly looked after for 15 years was now going to be the setting for a new chapter in our family. The sunlight of spring bounced and flickered off the coffee cups on the table. The rage and sorrow weren't totally gone. However, observing the pure connection of the children, feelings of forgiveness started to come about, little by little. From this point forward, I'm going to be honest. This time around, nobody was shooting down Andrew's statements. Even though we can't go back in time, the future has a whole new feel to it. As grown-ups, we can make moves to bring joy to the kids. We were about to embark on a new chapter at the Twilight Cafe. Even though we weren't exactly a picture-perfect family, we'd recognize where everyone stood and what mattered. The children's joy. That was our solution, something we discovered during this tough time. I want to go to the zoo next time, Lily's pure voice echoed. That'd be lovely, Hannah agreed in a soft way. The town was getting softly covered by the springtime dusk beyond the window. A fresh chapter in our family's life was starting here. We were repairing our broken hearts while keeping moving ahead, one careful step at a time, but surely, that's the road we had decided to travel. After 3 years in the spring, I had pulled my car up in front of the Newton Free Library. It was a typical Saturday afternoon, and I was there to get my daughters. Peeking through the library's big windows, I saw Lily and Hannah. Those two were still best friends, sitting in their usual corner for the kids. Today was a special day. Hannah got her letter saying she'd been accepted into college. They accepted her into the Library and Information Science program at Harvard University. She had made the choice to follow her mom, Susan. Rebecca. I spun around to see Andrew standing right there. After the divorce, he had never stopped finding his way, evolving little by little. He'd left his job in investment advising and was now a financial counselor, assisting single parents with their money matters. Tomorrow's the counseling session, isn't it? He still goes to family therapy every week. The way he faced what happened and tried to do what he should for both families seemed genuine at the very least. Yep, and also this, he gave me a couple of envelopes. One had the money for Hannah's college and the other contained Lily's middle school enrollment fees. It proved he'd made saving for the kids' schooling a priority, apart from child support payments. Susan said she's going to wrap up early today. Susan, who is still working as a librarian, has risen to the top of the children's section at the library. She came up with the sisters' reading program, which has really become a big deal in our community. We always eat together on the weekends. The table, which used to be a source of tension, now feels comfortable and is the setting for easy conversation. Occasionally, we can even hear laughter. Even though it isn't perfect, everyone has settled into their place and we're all moving forward. Dad. Lily ran over from the library and went right to Andrew. He gave his daughter a gentle hug. Hannah trailed a little behind, shyly showing her father the acceptance letter. Congratulations, Hannah. Tears welled up in Andrew's eyes. I was watching this whole thing from a little ways off. Maybe broken hearts never fully mend, but the kids' beaming smiles gently softened the hearts of us grown-ups. Cherry blossoms were floating in the air. That day, 3 years ago, happened during this same time of year. What I thought was the finish line back then, I now understand was really the start of something new. I see Andrew living a life of true purpose now, taking care of his obligations to both of his families. I think it's his way of making amends, and maybe it's a fresh start at loving people. Even though things aren't ideal, we're all pushing ahead on our separate paths. I watch the cherry blossom petals twirling in the air right outside the library. It feels like they're proclaiming the start of a fresh chapter in life.